From humble beginnings to an empire of terror, the SS evolved from a small group of bodyguards into one of the most feared and destructive institutions in modern history. Founded in 1925, the Schutzstaffel, or SS, began as Adolf Hitler's personal guard, tasked with protecting the Führer and enforcing his authority. In its earliest years, it numbered only a few dozen men, handpicked for their loyalty and discipline. But over the next 2 decades, the SS grew into a sprawling, multifaceted organization that extended its reach into every corner of Nazi Germany's political, military, and social systems. By 1939, on the eve of World War II, the SS had splintered into several distinct branches. The Allgemeine SS, General SS, handled ideological training, internal security, and administration, ensuring that Nazi policies were enforced throughout the Reich. The Waffen-SS, on the other hand, transformed into a formidable combat force, fighting alongside the Wehrmacht on nearly every front, from the western battlefields of France to the brutal Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. Known for their fanaticism and merciless efficiency, Waffen-SS units often surpassed even regular army divisions in their ruthlessness toward prisoners and civilians. Another branch, the Totenkopfverbände, or Death's Head units, administered the concentration and extermination camps. These SS men became the overseers of humanity's darkest chapter, managing forced labor, deportations, and the systematic murder of millions in the Holocaust. Life within the SS was dominated by ideological indoctrination. Young recruits, many drawn from the Hitler Youth, were trained to obey orders without question, to suppress compassion, and to view loyalty to Hitler as a sacred duty that surpassed allegiance to family, faith, or conscience. Discipline was absolute, hierarchy unquestioned. Disobedience, even hesitation, could result in punishment or death. The daily routine of SS members combined physical training, ideological instruction, and brutal enforcement of Nazi policy. In camps like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Stutthof, guards oversaw prisoners subjected to starvation, disease, and forced labor. Death marches, particularly in the final months of the war, became grim rituals. Tens of thousands of emaciated prisoners forced to walk for miles in freezing conditions without food or water. Anyone who stumbled or slowed was executed on the spot. Officers recorded these atrocities with chilling bureaucratic precision, maintaining logs of transports, executions, and prisoner deaths as if they were routine administrative tasks. Einsatzgruppen, or mobile killing units, carried the machinery of death beyond the camps. These units followed the German army into occupied Eastern Europe, conducting mass shootings of Jews, Roma, and political prisoners. Officers like Bruno Streckenbach coordinated these massacres with methodical efficiency, calculating how to kill the greatest number of people in the shortest time. Indoctrination and fear transformed ordinary men into instruments of genocide, men who could commit unspeakable atrocities with neither hesitation nor remorse. Violence had become normalized, murder a matter of duty. As the war turned against Germany, the SS faced its downfall. By 1945, Allied and Soviet advances shattered the Nazi command structure. Communications broke down, cities lay in ruins, and Himmler's desperate final orders sent prisoners on death marches to prevent their liberation and testimony. Many SS men fled their posts, abandoning the ideology they once worshipped. Himmler himself was captured, but took his own life in May 1945. Other high-ranking officers were executed or captured, while lower-ranking guards faced an uncertain fate, scattered across a collapsing empire, hunted by victors and haunted by their past. In the aftermath, the world began the long process of uncovering the crimes of the SS, yet many of its members vanished into anonymity. Some hid in rural villages, assuming new identities and professions, bakers, mechanics, laborers, while others fled Europe entirely, aided by secret escape networks known as rat lines. These underground organizations, often supported by sympathetic clergy and former Nazi sympathizers, provided forged documents, money, and passage to distant countries like Argentina, Syria, or the United States. One such man was Bruno Day, a quiet baker from northern Germany. For decades, he lived an unremarkable life, known by his neighbors as kind and polite. But beneath this facade lay a horrific truth. Day had served as an SS guard at Stutthof concentration camp, where thousands perished under brutal conditions. Drafted at 17, he was indoctrinated into the Waffen-SS and assigned to Stutthof in 1944, where his duties included guarding prisoners and supervising death marches in the final months of the war. Survivors later recalled the cruelty of those marches, the barking of guards, the sound of gunfire as the week collapsed. Day's role, though seemingly minor, contributed directly to the machinery of death. For decades, he escaped notice, until German investigators uncovered his past in 2011. At 93, he was finally brought to trial, one of the last Nazi war criminals ever prosecuted. Others went farther. Hans Lipskis, a Lithuanian-born SS guard at Auschwitz, built a new life in Chicago after immigrating to the United States under a false name in 1941. Known as a quiet, meticulous man, Lipskis lived as a salesman, blending seamlessly into post-war American life. It was not until the early 2000s that authorities discovered his identity. Charged with complicity in the murder of thousands, he was deemed unfit to stand trial due to dementia and died in 2016, never convicted. Some SS officers, like Bruno Streckenbach, operated from behind desks rather than on killing grounds. Yet their actions were equally deadly. As a senior administrator in occupied Poland, Streckenbach coordinated deportations, executions, and transport logistics that sent tens of thousands to their deaths. His obsessive focus on timetables and reports turned genocide into an administrative routine. Though Allied intelligence tracked him for years, he was never tried. He lived quietly in West Germany, unrepentant until his death. Karl Linus, an Estonian SS officer, commanded the Vuovara concentration camp, where he ruled with sadistic authority. Survivors recalled his presence during public executions and his whip in hand as prisoners collapsed from exhaustion. After the war, he escaped to the United States and lived quietly in New York for decades. Only in the 1980s did U.S. investigators uncover his past. Stripped of citizenship and deported to the Soviet Union, Linus died in custody. Another ghost of the SS finally brought to justice. Walter Raeder, an Austrian officer, led SS troops in Italy responsible for the 1944 Marzabotto massacre, one of the worst atrocities in Western Europe. Over 700 civilians, men, women, and children, were executed in a single campaign of terror. Captured and tried in Italy, Raeder was sentenced to life imprisonment, though he was released in 1985 and lived quietly until his death in 1991. Erich Priebke, another SS officer, oversaw the 1944 Ardeatine Caves massacre in Rome, where 335 Italian civilians were executed in reprisal for a partisan attack. After the war, Priebke escaped to Argentina, living under a false identity for 50 years. When journalists exposed him in 1994, he was extradited to Italy and convicted. Due to his advanced age, he was placed under house arrest, where he remained until his death in 2013. Friedrich Engel, the former head of the SS in Genoa, Italy, ordered the execution of dozens of prisoners in reprisal attacks. Known as the Butcher of Genoa, he evaded justice for decades, living openly in Germany until his conviction in 2002. Though sentenced to 7 years in prison, his sentence was suspended due to age and overturned 2 years later. He died in 2006 at the age of 97, unpunished, but forever marked by infamy. Not all SS members carried weapons. Some wielded pens. Karl Möckel, an accountant, was the head of administrative operations at Auschwitz, responsible for the logistics of deportations and the confiscation of victims' property. His efficiency kept the machinery of genocide running smoothly. After the war, he disappeared into post-war Germany, living under his real name without ever facing trial. Michael Seifert, a Ukrainian SS guard, lived in Canada for decades under the alias Misha. Investigators later discovered his role in the Bolzano transit camp in Italy, where he had committed horrific acts, including murder, torture, and rape. Convicted in absentia in 2000 and extradited to Italy in 2008, Seifert died in prison 2 years later. The story of the SS does not end with the war's conclusion. It lingers in the stories of those who escaped, those who were caught, and those who lived ordinary lives while carrying extraordinary guilt. These men, guards, officers, bureaucrats, represent the chilling truth of how ideology, obedience, and bureaucracy combine to create a system capable of industrialized murder. Even as time passes, the legacy of the SS remains a warning that ordinary people, under the right conditions of indoctrination and authority, can become instruments of unimaginable evil, and that justice, though delayed, never entirely disappears.